I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the brutal murder of a woman who was close to giving birth. And prosecutors say that was the motive. A man who didn't want the baby because he already had a family. Here's the story. In a Florida courtroom, the air is heavy with grief and accusation as Jose Escalera stands trial for the brutal killing of his mistress, 23-year-old Tania Wise, who was 8 months pregnant. Prosecutors argue he was cornered by a secret life that was unraveling. Text and recordings reveal tension, threats, and a man desperate to silence the truth before it reached his family. They describe how Wise's body was found in horrific conditions, evidence they say points to planning and intent. The state painting him as a man willing to sacrifice 2 lives to preserve his own. But the defense is pushing back, suggesting inconsistency in timelines and questioning whether prosecutors can truly prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Escalera's hand delivered the fatal blow. The defense highlighting the lack of direct eyewitnesses, casting shadows on circumstantial evidence. At the heart of this trial lies a haunting question: betrayal, desperation, or doubt? What really sealed Tania Wise's fate? Incredibly tragic story. 8 months pregnant. So she's gone. The baby's gone. So when you look at this case, this story, this investigation, and trying to figure out what's going on, to me, it starts with the relationship between the accused killer and the victim in the case. So let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who has been following this case for us. Cody, great to see you tonight. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about this relationship. What do we know about the relationship between Escalera and the victim, Tania Wise?
Well, Vinny, it's interesting because the prosecution has been a little bit vague as far as the relationship between these two so far. But what we do know is that Tania Wise was Jose Escalera's mistress on the side. Now, Jose was married with 4 children, no less. And him and Tania met through one of Tania's former boyfriends, this guy by the name of Bradley Rodriguez Jr., who still so happened to pay for Tania's cell phone bill at the time. So Jose was also 41 years old at the time of the incident, while Tania was only 23. So there's quite a bit of an age gap there between these two. Now, the prosecution says that they interviewed witnesses, of course, and these witnesses told police that Jose had gotten Tania pregnant and had given her money for an abortion, of course, so his wife wouldn't find out and cause this whole uproar in his life. But they say that Tania pocketed the money, which could subsequently point to a motive here in this murder, Vinny. But in a police interview, Jose says that he had minimal contact with Tania, let alone having a child with her. Take a listen to this.
Did you ever keep in touch with Tania?
No, sir.
No?
The only time we talked was when her son came over our house, because I have a 9-year-old, and she used to drop him off, and he stayed with us for the weekend. That was the only...
So you would watch her kids sometimes?
Yeah, because he'd come hang out with my son, so, you know, we'd take him for the weekend, and then she would come back and pick him up.
Did you have any other involvement with Tania?
No, sir.
None?
No.
Other than just watching her kid?
No. Nothing else. Just bring Jamal over, she hung out with us, Randy would come over, and then they eat.
Oh, you know she used to dance, right?
Yeah, she was a stripper, that's what I'm saying.
That maybe you were the father of the child. There's no chance.
We got nothing to do with that.
Absolutely positive. No way.
No way. No way. If I was to do something like that, I would take responsibility for it. Like what happened with my first 2.
Let's say you've done it before, right?
What?
Taking responsibility.
Yeah, I got 4 kids from 3 different chicks, so.
Now, Vinny, further along in this interview, the police tell him that they brought him in because Tania is dead. So he's hearing this, allegedly, for the first time. Take a listen and also watch his reaction to learning this information.
Well, it's about to get real. okay? Because I'm gonna tell you why we brought you in. Because Tanya's dead.
What?
Because Tanya is dead. We found her deceased Friday. And we've been interviewing everybody that has contact with her, so we're trying to iron out everybody's stories.
Wow.
Because there are a lot of things flying around, people saying stuff about other people. And
It's always like that. That's crazy. That's crazy. Wow.
So, Vinny, you got a couple of wows. Now, on one hand, you know, a bit of a lackluster reaction from the man the prosecution says was heavily involved with Tanya. But on the other hand, you know, maybe he wanted to avoid suspicion by looking too emotional.
Yeah, that's an interesting look in that interview. All right, Cody's going to stick around. So you see what prosecutors are doing here, right? They're saying, listen, she's 8 months pregnant. He gave her money to get rid of the baby. She didn't. She kept the money and she was going to have the baby. But she was murdered. That brings us to the first question in our investigation. Is this a strong motive? A man with a family, a man who is married, a man with a woman on the side. The woman on the side carrying his child. Here to help answer that question, let's bring in author and nationally certified mental health clinician who specializes in trauma, child abuse, and neglect, Sharonda Brown, and former assistant state attorney, criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney, Sue Ann Robinson, who is down in Florida where all this is happening. All right, Sue Ann, I'll begin with you. Just from, inside of a courtroom, do you feel like this is a strong argument to make, a strong motive, something that a jury would believe is a reason why a man would murder a woman who's about to give birth? We don't hear Sue Ann's voice. I don't hear it. Do we hear it?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. Go ahead, Sue Ann.
All right. The top two reasons are motives for murder are money and covering up infidelity. Like those are the two top ones. And we have both here in this case. I feel like he definitely, the motive that the state has painted is leading nicely to the facts of the case. I mean, we watched his questioning where he flat out denied having any type of interaction, which speaks a lot, because if he had been honest at that point, that would have kind of taken the heat off of him, in the sense that the jury could say, okay, well, maybe he's not a murderer because he's not a murderer, a cheater, and a liar. But now he's got all three of those strikes against him.
Yeah, the lying does not play well inside of a courtroom. Sharonda Brown, let's look at this relationship now. He's twice her age. Twice her age. What are your thoughts about what this situation that he apparently has gotten himself into, can it lead to that level of violence that we're talking about here?
Oh, absolutely. When I hear of stories where a man is twice someone's age, twice the woman's age, he's 41, she's 23. She clearly was a teen parent. If her child is coming over to play with his child, his son's 7, there's this amount of power there. I think the other piece, too, is that if she's coming over, which means the wife has met her, she's been around, it's more than just, manipulation. It's also very sneaky and calculated behavior, which is more than enough to be ashamed of. So then she comes up pregnant. So now there's things to explain here. So when this happens, he has to cover this up on some level, and then to take the money, allegedly to take the money and not do it for what he said to do it for, that's also like a disrespect level for someone who wants control and power. So it's like a slap in the face. It's like, I gave you the money, you didn't do it. So yes, it's a lot of issues with that dynamic. There's control, power, there's influence, there's manipulation, because she's much younger than he is. So, which goes back to, if you don't listen to me, there'll be consequences.
Sue Ann, how much of what the jury needs to hear from prosecutors here is about, you've got the forensic evidence, right? You've got the elements of the crime versus the jury understanding the nature of this relationship?
I think it's critical for the prosecution to set the stage for the motive and for the context. That's going to set the stage for the jury and give them the lens that they're going to view the evidence through. So absolutely, they need to establish the context for the relationship, establish the fact that there's an age gap, that yes, their kids play together, so there's familiarity, and that despite that familiarity, there's a breach there because he's married. And he's also, I just think that his statement to the police is so telling, because he just so easily lied to the police and said, no, absolutely not. No interaction. She just comes over with her son, which they know is a lie. They know is a lie at the time, in the sense that he's already under investigation, but he knew it was a lie. So now it puts the jury in the position where we've seen him lie before and not even flinch. So is this another circumstance in where he's pleading not guilty? Obviously, is this another circumstance where he's presenting us with a lie?
Let me ask you, Sharonda, I always think about this. I'm like, okay, this guy, obviously he's put himself into a really bad position, right? He's got his family on one side, mistress carrying his child, right? Allegedly, but not allegedly, because it's been proven through DNA. The mentality to, okay, my life is going to be blown up if this comes out, but if you murder someone, if you kill someone, your life is destroyed. Not only is your life destroyed, your freedom is gone. You're looking over your shoulder the rest of your life. You've taken a life. You've got to live with that. And if you get caught, everyone knows everything. Plus, you potentially go to death row. Do you think that calculation is ever done in scenarios like this?
No, it is not. There's a total disconnect with people who lie and sociopathically lie. If they're disconnected, they don't have the empathy that's required for that type of thought process. I don't think he even thought as far as what's going to happen to me if this comes out. I think he thought, let me get rid of this problem because I have to hide what I am, doing here. And he doesn't want the consequences. People who are sociopathic liars, they fear consequences of their actions, or they believe there should be none. So they're not going to see that level of empathy. They're going to be more upset that they got caught and that they feel judged for getting caught than the actual crime or the actual mishap itself.
Sharonda Brown, always great to have you on the program. Great insight. Sue Ann is going to stick around. Coming up next, what do the cause and manner of death tell us about the killer?
She was 23.
I'm sorry.
She was 23.
Okay. And did she have children?
Yes. At home, she had an 8-year-old, Jamar, and she was pregnant.
8.5 months pregnant, a young mother found brutally murdered.
To lose a child, there's no words for it.
Now the victim's boyfriend, a married father of 4,
is charged for the murder of his alleged mistress and her unborn child.
That's one of the things that struck me. He was not remorseful.
From the first gavel to the final verdict, Court TV takes you inside the South Florida courtroom
for this tragic death penalty case.
The pregnant mistress murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
To lose a child, it's just, there's no words for it. And then to lose my grandson too, there's no words for it.
That's the victim's mom talking about the loss of her daughter and her grandson. She was 8 months pregnant. She was very, very close to giving birth. What's been described here is such incredible violence in this case. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Let's talk about that violence and what happened here to the victim, Tania Wise.
Well, Vinny, violent is one of many words that can describe this. I'd probably describe it as a gruesome death involving blunt force trauma to her head and stab wounds to her neck area. And one of the worst parts about it, Vinny, is that she was just discarded on the side of the street as if she was just trash. The cause of death, of course, blunt force trauma with a heavy object, a manner of death, homicide. Take a listen to a portion of the prosecutor's opening statement, briefly talking about her death.
He cut her throat and bashed her head in.
knowing that possibly it was his child, but he did it anyways. Because he had planned it out, and he said, I have to do it, Eric. I have no other choice.
And Vinnie, you heard him there mentioning cutting her throat. Take a listen to the medical examiner on the stand going into more detail about those stab wounds to her neck.
You can see that there are two distinct lines, a V-shaped bifurcation of the anterior part of the neck where this incised wound starts at the front of the neck. You can see it goes full thickness through the skin, and then it goes around the side of the neck to the back of the neck. In this case, there are two wound tracts that merge. So there's two incised wounds that merge into one wound tract.
Meaning that there were two wounds, not one. This is not one continuous wound, this is two.
Two, yes. This wound in centimeters was 19 centimeters in length, and in inches that would be 7.5 inches in length.
Okay. And the depth?
The depth of the wound ranged from in the deepest part of that wound, it went to 1 1/2 inches, and in other areas is 1 1/4 inches in depth. At its deepest margin on the lateral neck, you can see the cervical vertebrae at the base of the wound. This is the baby after I've incised the amniotic sac and I'm removing the baby from the body. You can see that this is the same position it was in. Full-term child with no abnormalities noted. Full-term fetus, near full-term fetus with no abnormalities noted.
And Vinnie, keep in mind the way she was speaking there, the jury and the people in the gallery in the courtroom are seeing these gruesome wounds. They're seeing this fetus outside the mother's body, and you heard her mention no abnormalities. Vinnie, 8.5 months pregnant. That baby would have lived if its life force, its mother had lived. It was a viable fetus for sure.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Cody's going to stick around, and that brings us to the next question in our investigation, which is, what do the cause and manner of death tell us about the killer? She was murdered, but what can you take away from what we learned from the crime scene, the cause and manner of death here? Here to help with our investigation is forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan, the host of the Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan podcast, extremely popular. Still with us, former Assistant State Attorney, Criminal Defense Attorney, and Civil Rights Attorney Sue Ann Robinson. All right, Joseph Scott Morgan, your thoughts about what the details here from the medical examiner and from the crime scene tell us about this killer?
This individual had brought to bear apparently two separate weapons to facilitate this. We're talking about incised injuries on the anterior neck. There's two separate insults. You heard Dr. O'Neill refer to the fact that one was so very deep that you could actually visualize the cervical spine. And then there is this blunt force trauma to the head. This is a crushing injury, Vinnie. And many times with blunt force trauma, you can have multiple lacerations in a specific area. And sometimes these injuries, as well as the underlying fractures, can kind of communicate, and it's hard to make one out of the other, particularly in this environment. One more thing I'll add here. You're talking about what can we draw from the way she was killed. I submit to you we can draw a lot from how she was found. She's found discarded on the side of the road like rubbish in a drainage ditch. And that gives me an indication as an old death investigator that this was something that was quite hurried, frenzied, just kind of tossed aside, rolled out of the car, discarded, and then he drove off.
The image we're looking at right now, that's where she was found. The blurred part is her body.
Yeah, there's no effort to memorialize her body in any way. Sticks, branches, anything like that. She's not taken off in the brush. She's merely just left there. And that really, I think personally, that gives you a real insight into this person's mind.
Sue Ann, this is a death penalty case. It seems to me these are the types of facts, the brutality of what happened, the discarding of this woman and her unborn child could loom large if he's convicted and we're at the penalty phase.
Absolutely, because those things are going to go straight to upgrading it, and the jury is going to have the opportunity and have to collaborate on those details. They're going to have to discuss the brutality of the crime, the fact that it was an up close and personal crime, because the way that the medical examiner has described the stab wounds, obviously they were in close proximity to each other. And so it's just one of those cases where when you are talking about factors that lead to the death penalty, absolutely, the unborn child, her being discarded, all of those things lead to that, to a jury just looking and seeing at what a heinous, inhumane act was committed.
Joseph Scott Morgan talking about that baby. If she hadn't been discarded, if she had been in a place where help was nearby, do you think there was any chance that baby could have been saved?
Oh, of course, yeah. That child, particularly if you listen to what Dr. O'Neill had to say, was completely viable. And that's what turns this into a double homicide. And the fact that this is, this is so brutal. You're not just discarding the mother, you're discarding your child as well. That's what's so striking about it. This child was, fully viable. She's right at the edge then of delivering this child. And he would have been aware of that. Certainly, she certainly would have been presenting that way. And if he can do even baseline arithmetic, he can kind of figure it out. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think that, desperate times in his mind, call for desperate means and horrific means as it applies to this poor victim and her baby.
Yeah, it brings me back to the case of Lacey Peterson. With that,
yes, it does.
9 months pregnant, carrying Connor with her. They had named the baby. She had named the baby. Sue Ann Robinson, thank you so much. Great to have your insight tonight. Joseph Scott Morgan is sticking around. Up next, who does the evidence favor, the prosecution or the defense? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the brutal murder of Tania Wise, who was close to giving birth and had already named her child when her life was taken. Now the accused is facing the death penalty at his murder trial. Here's the story. In a Florida courtroom, jurors listen intently as prosecutors unravel the case against Jose Escalera, accused of murdering his pregnant mistress, 23-year-old Tania Wise. They argue that Escalera, fearing his double life would be exposed, lured Tania to a secluded spot where she was beaten and strangled. Graphic crime scene photos show her lifeless body hidden in the woods, and prosecutors emphasize that the unborn child, just weeks from delivery, was also lost. Text messages reveal escalating conflict, with Tania pressing him to take responsibility, and recordings capturing her, voicing her fear for her own safety. The defense, however, attacks the state's narrative. They point out no eyewitnesses placed Escalera at the scene, and they argue that forensic evidence, while compelling, is just circumstantial. They question the inconsistencies in the investigation and suggest alternative suspects could not be ruled out. With the death penalty on the table, the trial now balances chilling evidence against the weight of reasonable doubt. Now, a lot of the cases, when we first take a look at them, we're like, oh, yeah, prosecutors, they got this in the bag. Well, those of you who watch Court TV know that is not the case. Prosecutors have to prove it. They need to bring the evidence beyond any and all reasonable doubt. And during the course of a trial, things happen. And we've been shocked many times. So what is the evidence in this case? Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, let's go through the prosecution's case here. What is the evidence that they have that they believe will prove that Jose Escalera is guilty of this murder?
Well, Vinny, I don't want to quite say that they have it in the bag or that it's a slam dunk, but they do have some pretty damning evidence against him. And they start with, in the opening statements, outlining communications that Jose had with this man named Eric. Now, those communications weren't specified whether they were text messages, phone calls, or emails, but the communications did happen according to them. Now, as you listen to these communications, they sound pretty much like admissions of guilt, because he's talking about how this is Jose to Eric, how he'd lose everything if his wife found out, and that he has to do something, and that he has a place to hide the body. All evidence of criminal activity going on. But the kicker, Vinny, is that the prosecution also says that they have paternity test DNA that says that he is, in fact, the father of the unborn child. Take a listen to the prosecutor laying out all this evidence during openings and the criminalist who analyzed this DNA evidence.
I have to do it, Eric. I have no other choice. I'm going to lose everything. If my wife finds out something like that, oh my God, bro, I'm going to lose everything. Bro, I have a spot. I have a spot. I have to find a spot where I'm going to dump her. I'll throw away all the clothes, or I'll burn them, or I'll wash them with Clorox. So obviously, law enforcement, there's a medical examiner, they're gonna do a paternity test of this baby that Tania had. And they're gonna look into that. But what they're also gonna look at is they're gonna start to look at phone records. They're gonna look at calls. They're going to do search warrants, and that's exactly what is done in this case. After the 25th, they do a search warrant subsequent on the defendant's vehicle again on September 24th of 2018. And at that time, they use something, and it's called Blue Star, and it's a chemical that they spray inside of his truck. And if there's blood inside, it lights up blue in the dark. So they spray that, and sure enough, they look inside of his truck, and there's parts that are glowing. Evidence that there was blood in his truck. They checked multiple people to see who could be the father of that child, and 99.99%, it's the defendant. So not only did he kill Tania Wise, he killed his own son that she was 38 weeks pregnant with, because he didn't want his wife to find out that he'd been with someone else.
What I'd like to ask you about now is State's Exhibit 29. It's a section of carpet from the driver's side. Were you able to get any DNA evidence from that carpet?
Yes, so the DNA profile obtained from the carpet was consistent with being a mixture of a major and a minor component. The female DNA profile obtained from the major component of this mixture matches the DNA profile obtained from the blood standard from Tania Wise at all 21 locations. The DNA profiles from the child, baby Wise, and the mother, Tania Wise, were compared with that of the alleged father, Jose Soto-Escalera. The DNA profile from Jose Soto-Escalera is consistent with that required of the child's biological father. The next stat is called the probability of parentage. This is the chance that the alleged parent is the biological parent when compared to a random individual, and this is approximately 99.9999999999.
So, Vinny, just a quick recap of what we just heard there. Two major things. His truck, her blood DNA found inside. DNA testing between him and the unborn child, 99.9999% that it was him. Now, let's take it back to his police interview where he says never had sex with Tania. He says Tania has only ever been in his truck one time. He also encouraged police to take his DNA sample. Take a listen to him.
You ever been with her? Never had sex with her? Hand to God. Hand to God.
I'm good. Y'all can ask me, like I said, y'all can ask me whatever y'all need, I'm here.
You ever loaned your truck to her?
No.
You never been inside your truck?
A long time ago when me and my wife went to Cheddar's.
So she hasn't been in your truck since March?
No, she's not. That was the only time she went on my truck.
So there would be no reason to find your DNA on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said you're willing to give a sample of your DNA?
Yeah.
Now, she was pregnant. Okay?
Okay.
And we're going to take DNA from the child who's also deceased.
Okay.
Right? So there's not going to be any surprises. We're going to have to contact you in a little bit and be like, hey, why is it coming back?
Guys, do whatever you got to do.
So Vinnie never had sex with Tania yet. His DNA matches the DNA of the unborn baby. It's going to be very interesting to see how the defense pushes back against that evidence.
Yeah, that is some compelling evidence. Cody Thomas sticking around. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. And it's, of course, all about the evidence, the state's case. Who does the evidence favor, the prosecution or the defense? Remember, prosecution, they got to get it beyond any and all reasonable doubt. The defense, they just have to raise a doubt. Is reasonable doubt lingering? Are there holes in the case? Here to help answer that question, forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan, also the host of the very popular podcast, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan, and Florida, former prosecutor in Florida and constitutional attorney Chris Ann Hall is with us. All right, Joseph Scott Morgan, this evidence, what are your thoughts about it? Is this the type of evidence that can get you over the top? Are there holes anywhere, unanswered questions that are lingering here?
Yeah, I guess the next question I would have asked him, did she have a cut hand or was she had a bloody nose or something, you know, while she was in her truck? I don't know of any other way to explain how her blood gets into the truck. Now, that alone will not convict him, but it's the totality. It's not just the one thing. It's the totality of everything circumstantially that surrounds this. Physical presentation, the rage that's involved with, I mean, let's face it, this comes down to a mutilation and a dumping of her remains. Once they have proven the paternity in this particular case, prosecution doesn't have to prove motive. However, from an investigatory standpoint, we began to think about what could have driven somebody to do this to try to narrow down the field of suspects. And in this case, you know, he's going to be sitting at the top of the list. I think that it's going to be very interesting, as the reporter stated, to see how the defense defends against these astronomical numbers relative to DNA.
Absolutely. Chris Ann Hall, you know, there's the physical evidence, the blood, the DNA, the motive, but then on top of it, there is him in that interview room saying things that are provably false. What are your thoughts? Do you see the reasonable doubt in the air? Are there holes left somewhere in this case?
Well, let's remember that we've already heard from the opening statement of the prosecution that they're going to be showing text messages. And for me, that's kind of the thing that puts it over the top. You're going to see the defense attorneys really try to undermine the DNA in the truck. I can envision them saying something like, these injuries were incredible, but you only found a little bit of blood. Why was the blood on the driver's side? And so I think they're really going to try to discredit that. Their prosecution's going to have a problem proving that he killed her just because it was his baby. I think that you're going to hear testimony from the defense side of how he takes care of his children and things like that, and how he will not be the kind of guy that could murder his own child. So right now, as it stands, because we're just in the beginning, this evidence, although is highly favorable to the state, has many holes that are going to have to be filled if the state's going to get a victory in this case.
And the other thing here, Joseph Scott Morgan, this is a death penalty case, and we know from interviewing them, we know from the decisions they've made through the years that jurors take this responsibility incredibly seriously, and they want the government, the prosecution, the DA, the state attorney, to bring it. Do you feel that they need to bring something extra in a death penalty case?
No. I think that what they need to do is make sure that all of the evidence that they are putting out there is all shored up and it's solid. Everything from chain of custody to procedural issues. You know, when you begin to think about DNA and DNA processing, you know, any kind of questions that could arise from that, they need to be prepared when defense comes up, because there will be, you know, in that cross-examination phase, an opportunity perhaps on the part of the prosecution to kind of, you know, ram these points home. I think one of the most glaring things is this issue of the abortion that was paid for, and she was non-compliant. Well, why are you paying her to get an abortion, to kill your child? You know, that's a big question here, because that's the motivating factor behind all of this. You kind of connect the dots along that timeline. I, for one, I'm going to be watching Court TV to see what happens with this.
All right, Joseph Scott Morgan, big thank you. Chris Ann Hall is going to stay with us. Still to come, does Escalera's defense make sense?
Had Tania decided on the name of the baby?
She decided that on the baby shower. It's Josiah Thomas Wise.
Okay, a boy.
A boy.
My two best friends were just murdered.
Join me for a Court TV true crime series where we take you from the crime scene to the courtroom.
Donna Adelson hates every piece of grass that Dan Marcel ever walked on.
It's something that'll haunt all of us forever.
It always seemed like he was covering or deceiving.
This was a whole different level.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands, a Court TV original series. Season premieres September 27th.
Only on Court TV.
Man, prior to your daughter's murder, you were aware that she was dating Bradley Rodriguez Jr., correct?
Yeah, they kind of had some type of relationship.
Were you aware that Mr. Bradley Rodriguez Jr. had been threatening Tania?
At one point, she had mentioned it to me.
He's facing the death penalty. The evidence seems strong, but every case we cover, the defense has a defense. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, so what is Escalera's defense here?
Well, Vinny, it seems that the defense is taking the route of pointing the finger at Tania, the circle she kept, and her alleged promiscuity. Now, in their opening statement, the defense says that Tania told multiple men that they were the father of this unborn child, and in his police interview, Escalera echoed the same sentiments. Take a listen to both of them.
Unfortunately, the profession that Miss Wise was in, a dancer and an escort, brought her into contact with many unsavory characters. And what you will learn in the days following the discovery of her body, law enforcement got DNA samples from many men, not just my client. You will also learn that Miss Wise had told Bradley Rodriguez Jr. that he was the father of her son. And you will learn that she also told Mark Burke that he was the father of her son. It was in this fraught situation that her untimely demise occurred.
Listen, she so many dudes that she talked to, and God knows what she did. What do you mean? No, I'm saying because she knows a lot of guys, so I don't know. Like, God knows what she's done. I don't know. I'm just saying.
So, Vinny, again, as far as the defense's case, it seems as if they are taking the route of pointing the finger at Tania's decision-making in an effort to point the finger away from Escalera.
Yeah, going after the victim. All right, Cody Thomas, great work as always. Thanks so much. That brings us to the next question in our investigation, and it's about the defense. Does Escalera's defense make sense here? Here to help us with our investigation, former New York police officer, retired police lieutenant commanding officer of the Nassau County Police K-9 Unit, Mike Gould, and still with us, former Florida prosecutor, constitutional attorney Chris Ann Hall. All right, Mike, what do you think? Does this make sense to you?
Thanks for having me, Vinny. It makes very little sense to me. Kind of reminds me of the Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson case where he was convicted of murdering his wife and baby. No, I think the prosecution has a very strong circumstantial case. I thought the prosecutor came out very articulately, laid out the story. I was listening to it, and he really told the story without looking at notes. The defense comes in and just with a little checklist of doing what they should do, try to sow reasonable doubt. I don't think it's going to fly here. I mean, it's early on, but they're going to need a lot more than just what about this person, what about that person, and her job and her morality. It's not going to fly. He's got a lot on his plate to answer for.
Chris Ann Hall, your thoughts about, attacking this victim. She's brutally murdered. We know that. But going after her choices she makes, there's so many men out there. We don't know who the father was. She was telling everyone. Is that effective? Does it make sense?
Well, it makes sense from the defense side. This is typical homicide defense. You have to point to some other person. You have to attack the credibility of the evidence. You have to dispute the testimony. And the fact that she was pregnant is actually a kind of testimony. And I actually looked at the technique of the defense attorney. The check thing that she did is really a technique that is used in the courtroom to emphasize a list. And as she went back to her podium and scratched those off, she was emphasizing to the jury with her body language that there are multiple people, and this is an important fact. And the fact that perhaps even at the time she was about to give birth, she didn't even know who the father was, because the prosecution's going to lay heavy on this piece of DNA. The defense has to show that this piece of DNA is not relevant to the crime itself.
Mike Gould, do you think it's incumbent upon investigators to clear all of these other men, make sure that they were investigated, and make sure that they were accounted for?
Oh, of course. You never want to go down a rabbit hole with tunnel vision and accuse somebody. Absolutely. So it's really a tale of two techniques. I like the prosecution's style, and I understand the defense's style and presentation. But Vinny, it never ceases to amaze me, the callousness and total disregard for human life. I mean, there's never an excuse for murder, obviously. But this person, this alleged murderer, he had 9 months to concoct a plan. Hatch a plan, and this is what he comes up with: slitting somebody's throat and smashing her over the head and dumping her on the side of the road where people just drove by and saw.
Unreal.
It never ceases to amaze me.
We are out of time. Mike Gould, Chris Ann Hall, great to have you both with us. Thank you so much. Jose Escalera was in a relationship, a marriage with children, right? He chose to cheat. He chose to have unprotected sex. What he doesn't get to choose is whether that baby lives or dies. Now, if the prosecution proves that he is the one responsible here, there's something else he doesn't get to choose. Whether he, Jose Escalera, gets to live or die. That will be up to the jury. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.